Good night. Welcome to Conversation with Rickford Burke. This is, of course, Rickford Burke in New York. Good night to all of you. Thank you for joining me. Text me, let me know where you're already doing that. So you know the drill. Text me, let me know where you're watching from, wherever you're watching from, whether it's New York here or in United States of America, East Coast, West Coast, anywhere in North America, which includes United States, Mexico, and Canada. Text me, let me know how you're doing this evening. Or if you're watching from London, other parts of the United Kingdom, Europe, you guys have my sympathy there, you Britons have my sympathy on the death of the Queen. Or you're watching from Asia or Africa or the Caribbean or, of course, Guyana. Hope you're having a good time. Share the link. I see you doing that already. Over 180 of you have already done that. Keep sharing the link. Let's grow this audience. We have a very important topic to talk about. My guests are here. Share the link, and I'll be back in 60 seconds, and we'll start the program. Share the link. All right, so here we go. The RSS report is in, and it's an inflated, not so inflated balloon. So the government of Guyana yesterday issued a statement claiming that the RSS, which is the Regional Security Service, which the government seems to be relying on for these matters, including the Henry double murders. This is the same agency that allegedly investigated the Henry murders and came up with the fantastic conclusion that the police is doing a very good job. 2 years later, the case remains unsolved. This is the RSS. Police is doing a magnificent job. So the RSS, the government of Guyana, issued a statement claiming that through the Ministry of Home Affairs, they requested in the RSS, which is the Regional Security Service, Office of Professional Responsibility, to investigate this matter. And they said the RSS had the assistance, I'm not sure what that means, they had the assistance of a former chief inspector of the British Metropolitan Police Department. A former chief inspector. They don't name him, they don't give us his resume so that we can see, you know, what his qualifications are. Maybe he is an expert in computers, fixing computers. We don't know. Maybe he's an expert in repairing shoes. I don't know. We don't know. We don't know his expertise. So we just have this statement that the government of Guyana, again, seemed to be hiding something. Every stage of this investigation, the government seemed to be hiding something from the people. So the government put out this release, and it has some fantastic conclusions. And I'm going to talk to former Assistant Police Commissioner Paul Slow and counsel for Sergeant Dion Bascom, attorney at law Nigel Hughes, in a minute. But I just wanted to give some background to this story. As you know, Sergeant Dion Bascom is a sergeant with the Major Crimes Unit of the Guyana Police Force. He was involved in the Ricardo Fagundes murder, which happened right outside Palm Court a year ago, or just over a year ago, which is opposite, diagonally across the street from the president's residence, State House. And the perpetrators of this murder shot Ricardo Fagundes, known as Paper Shorts, 30-something times, and the car escaped straight up to the Linden-Suzdijk Highway, past all these police stations, all the way straight up to the Suzdijk Highway, where they burnt the car. And so Sergeant Dion Bascom, just around about a month ago, alleged that there has been a major cover-up of the crime. He said that businessman Azruddin Mohammed and a security associate of his company, Mohammed's Enterprise, were suspects in the case, and they had allegedly bribed officers of the CID, which is the Criminal Investigation Department of the Guyana Police Force, to cover up the matter. Mr. Bascom, Sergeant Bascom, alleged that Mr. Mark Richmond, who's a security officer with Mohammed's Enterprise, was a suspect in the case, as well as Mr. Azruddin Mohammed himself. Neither of the two were ever arrested or questioned by the police. The police force held a press conference to refute allegations by Sergeant Bascom, even though they did not specifically refute his allegation that these two gentlemen were suspects. As a matter of fact, the crime chief, Mr. Wendell Blenheim, confirmed that Mark Richmond was a suspect. He also confirmed that he was never questioned. So as a result of this allegation, Mr. Ali, or Finali, the president, requested through the Ministry of Home Affairs that the RSS investigates both the Pip Shorts murder and Sergeant Bascom's allegations. Now, I want to briefly summarize some things in this statement on the report. Now, the report was not released. We had a statement by the Ministry of Home Affairs that characterized the findings of the report. So we don't even know if this is true. And everything in this report, everything in the report was said at the press conference by Mr. Blanham and Acting Police Commissioner Clifton Hicken. everything in the report. So basically, the report is uh, a regurgitation of the police press conference. I'm not sure why this gentleman wasted his time and came all the way from London, if he did, to give us statements that were made by the police press conference, which were widely condemned. They were laughed out of town, the police department. They even lied at the press conference. And now they're trying to get validation of their conclusions. And so they have enlisted or procured the RSS to recite exactly what they claimed. There's no independent information here. There's no independent verification of anything in this report. And what is most amazing, the investigators never questioned Mr. Bascom. Never questioned Mr. Bascom. But they concluded his allegations have no, what is the word, the term they use? Provenance. It cannot be proven. It's hearsay. That's their conclusion. They never spoke to the man. They never asked the man for his evidence. They never asked the man for his sources. They never questioned anybody. They just went with everything the police said and put out a statement saying, oh yes, Mr. Bladder and Mr. Caesar are very credible, and everything the police is doing is above board. And yes, the police is doing a very good job. And we found no evidence at all of wrongdoing. They did not even comment on the ethics, the ethical practices of the Ghana Police Force. Everything is above board. The Ghana Police Force is wonderful. The investigation, which has not been solved in over a year, is progressing well. That's the RSS report. They said the exact same thing in the Henry double murders. The exact same thing. So we're left wondering again, when is this matter really going to be investigated? This is not an investigation. And we suspected this because the government said it is a review. It is a review. So the gentleman came from London with whomever from Barbados, that's where the RSS is based, and they sat down and looked at the file. They looked at the file that the police department gave to them and concluded the investigation is going very well. Sergeant Bascom, he has no evidence of anything. And nothing he said could be proven. And they flew back out of the country. I want to know how much money they were paid. A famous lawyer once said that something is missing from this RSS report. And I suspect he meant an A in the RSS. So join me now is Mr. Paul Slow, who's an Assistant Commissioner of Police, former Assistant Commissioner of Police of the Ghana Police Force. Mr. Slow, thank you for joining us. And also, my good friend, Mr. Nigel Hughes, Counsel for Dion Bascom.
Good night, Rickford. Always a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. The first thing, before I get to Mr. Slow, Counsel, in my preamble to introducing you, I mentioned that the investigators did not talk to Dion Bascom. They did not speak with Dion Bascom. From the onset, can there be a credible investigation by the RSS or a credible review of the investigation of this murder, as well as a credible investigation into the Bascom allegations without talking to Dion Bascom to find out where he got his information, what he learned from his involvement in this investigation, and does he have any evidence? Could any report be credible?
Thank you, Rickford. I think, it goes without saying, where you have a situation which is triggered by the revelations of a whistleblower, which Mr. Bascom would be, and that causes an invitation to be issued to an external body, supposedly independent, to investigate what the allegations were. The most basic thing one would expect is that the person who comes to conduct this interview or to investigation would actually speak with the person who made the claims. I would have thought that that's where you start. And in the absence of speaking with him, it would be difficult for you to arrive at a conclusion in relation to anything he said or whatever he referred to in his expose. Because that is the source. You need to speak to him to find out what evidence he has. You need to speak to him to find out, based on what he said, whether there's an independent basis to corroborate what he has said. And so, unfortunately, and it is most unfortunate, here we have another institution, the RSS, which has brought itself into some level of disrepute by actually assuming, and this is on the assumption, and I wish to make this very clear, all that I have seen is what the Ministry of Home Affairs has said about the report. So I can't comment on the report because I have not seen the report. But if what the Ministry of Home Affairs says about the report is accurate, I think it is most unfortunate, and I would assume in those circumstances that the RSS probably is hanging its head in shame, because this is probably policing 101. You got to speak to the person that makes the allegation. It's unbelievable.
Mr. Slope, let me ask you this. Have you ever been, as a former police officer, and you've been in the police force for decades. As a former police officer, have you ever conducted, been involved, or heard of a police investigation where the investigators never questioned the person that made the 911 call, never questioned the person that told the police of the crime, never questioned the man that pointed to the crime scene, never questioned the man that said, here, there's a crime here. Never questioned that witness, but they came up with a conclusion. Have you ever seen any investigation like that? We can't hear you. Your volume.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
All right.
Did you hear the question?
Let me say this. I love Calypso. One of my favorite Calypsonian is
I love soca, but go ahead.
The man who sing King Lear.
Nelson.
And one of the verses he said when he spoke about Taylor, he said his Taylor is the boss, Roy Seal is his name. Right? Cutting cloth, making suit is his game. Don't show him the man, my Taylor is class. Just show him the corner where the pillar pass, and he can make a suit. So perhaps it's this level of professionalism we have here to be able to come to these conclusions without even interacting with the man who made the statement. But more than that, let me say this just to follow up on what Nigel said earlier. Because the report is not made public, we are going, and the public is going by what was released by the Ministry of Home Affairs. I don't even know, I cannot, and we cannot even confirm that someone actually came from the RSS, because normal practice in a matter like this, if a person comes, at some stage the person would have maybe interacted with the media to say, well, he's here for this so we can see, or the name would have been supplied so you can do some background check. But in this case, this person was never presented to the public, never presented to the media. So I'm left to wonder if somebody actually came, because no name has been released. There was never any photograph of this person, and I am left to wonder, and I'm sure many people are going to wonder as well, whether in fact anyone came to do this review as they refer to it. But I have never seen anything. This is really remarkable that you're going to do a review, you're going to do an investigation, and if we are to follow what the ministry has said, the 8 points that they have raised, and they call it they call it the key findings.
We're coming. Yeah, we're going to come to that.
Yeah, but they're given these key findings, and they haven't spoken to the person who makes the allegation. Real remarkable.
Yeah, just for emphasis, I want to ask Council, and I deliberately wrote this question down in this structure, and I know Council is going to have a joke about it, but Council, have you ever defended, been involved in a prosecution, whatever, of a case where investigators refused or failed to interview the witness who discovered the crime, made a 911 call to the police, informed the police of the crime, and directed them to the crime scene? Have you ever seen a case like that anywhere in any jurisprudence in your studies or practice?
I think you know the answer to that. That is pretty straightforward. No, but I Rickford, we perhaps are, not that you're taking it lightly. I mean, it's pretty scary that we could actually reach and have a discussion on the fact that some regional body came conducted an interview, an investigation, without even speaking to the person that triggered the whole process. And unless there's the highest level of contempt for the citizenry of this country, this is unbelievable. This really is unbelievable. And then they go on not only to arrive at findings, but they impugn the man's character. They say that he's not credible, and without even giving him any opportunity whatsoever to actually say what he said. I don't know. I mean, I'm really worried.
For emphasis, as his attorney, are you aware if there was any request from the RSS for Sergeant Dion Bascom to provide any evidence about his allegation?
I can say this because I've spoken to Mr. Bascom very repeatedly over the last 3 to 4 days. No request, none, has gone to him. That's what he has said. And I can certainly say, as his counsel, not a single request has come to me from the Guyana Police Force, the RSS, or anyone. The last interaction we had with the Guyana Police Force was when I took his statement into the Office of Professional Responsibility, and they received it. Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Before I get into the details, the alleged details or conclusions that the Home Affairs Ministry claim are the conclusions of this report, there's one glaring aspect of the report that's actually factually false. And they set themselves up. And they said that Dion Bascom made these allegations because he was arrested and he was caught in this drug sting operation. And he came out with these allegations. But in fact, if they had spoken to, and this is why it's so incredible that this investigative agency or the investigators made themselves a fool by not speaking to Dion Bascom. That's why they could have come up with this nonsensical conclusion that he has no evidence. They claim that Dion Bascom made these allegations because he was caught in this drug sting operation by Kanu. But in fact, we're now learning, and it's a good thing Dion Bascom didn't say everything when he made his initial social media video. We're now learning that since April, Dion Bascom went to see the Minister of Home Affairs and made these exact same allegations. We're now learning that since early this year, Dion Bascom communicated with the president, Irfan Ali, provided some of these same allegations with evidence. He also spoke to Assistant Commissioner Watts earlier this year. Isn't it embarrassing, Paulslow, that the RSS jumped to these conclusions because they didn't have the facts? And they said that the man only made these allegations after he was arrested in this Kanu sting.
Well, let me go even further, because I'm aware that these allegations were made as early as February.
February, exactly.
As early as February this year, these allegations were made. So unless he is a big-time man who could have anticipated being held by Kanu, these things, and again, it goes to show that no proper review or no proper investigation was done, or else all these things would have been revealed, because the evidence is there about all these communications that you referred to. The February communication, the one with the Home Affairs Minister, the one with the President, the one with Mr. Watts, the evidence is there. So they're talking about evidence. And if you had done half a decent investigation, you would have found the evidence.
Counsel, is it unbelievable that we have a situation where the RSS and Mr. Chief Inspector of the Metropolitan Police was caught with his pants down?
I think, actually, Rickford, the impact of what you have just said takes the entire basis away from what the Home Affairs Ministry has said about the investigation, because they sought to discredit Mr. Bascom on the basis that he had been arrested and that this was a reaction to having been arrested for narcotics. That is the only basis, this, according to what the Ministry of Home Affairs says. So once that is contradicted by the facts that Mr. Slow has just articulated, that he saw Watts, that he made reports since February, then it means the entire premises of the RSS report insofar as it seeks to
Collapses.
contradict, completely collapses. Now, Rickford, this is the regional, whatever it is, security system, regional security service, which is supposed to be a higher body. It's supposed to be an independent body that is hired to come in and conduct a review. Now, if the basis upon which they seek to comment on Mr. Bascom completely evaporates without any decent investigation, Mr. Bascom would have given them the evidence to show that since February he reported that he spoke to Mr. Watts, that he contacted the Minister of Home Affairs, that he contacted the President. Then, as Mr. Slow has so beautifully put it, unless he was possessed of the powers of the supernatural, African or otherwise, there was no way this can go. And therefore, the RSS report now is of no value because it is immediately contradicted just by the presentation by Mr. Bascom of facts that contradict the entire basis. And so we are in a really dangerous state. And what it means now is that Mr. Bascom's life is in even greater danger because now not only has he implicated senior officers, he has now demonstrated that this was a charade, and that even the regional security report that came out, if what the Ministry of Home Affairs says is true, is completely laughable. And so the next step is going to be that Mr. Bascom cannot continue to embarrass the police force more and more. He's going to become even a greater liability. And so at this point, given the fact that the president hasn't responded to his request for witness protection, given the fact that he has demonstrated that this report by the regional, the RSS is completely flawed, then at this point, his options are very limited, and he's perhaps going to have to seek political asylum because we know what's going to happen to him if he remains in Guyana.
I'm going to come back to that. But let me ask you something. We see here right away the bogus basis on which they must think people are stupid. The bogus basis on which they send this matter to the DPP. And they're claiming that the RSS concluded, without any analysis of the laws of Guyana, the RSS concluded that he, in his revealing these, disclosing these, or blowing the whistle on these alleged acts of corruption, violated the Cybercrime Act, when there is a law, the Public Disclosures Act,
Precisely.
that insulates him from any prosecution or any acts of victimization as a result of his disclosure.
Absolutely. The whole point of the Public Disclosures Act is that you make these disclosures and you cannot be subject to sanction because you have made these disclosures. As a national, I feel embarrassed every time either the police or the government issue some statement on this matter, because it demonstrates a lack of familiarity with the laws of Guyana, which are publicly available to everybody. The concept behind whistleblowers is that you protect them. How are you going to go and charge somebody when the act itself says that you can't do it?
Right. I have another question, but I'm not going to ask you because you're in the legal profession. Let me ask Mr. Slow. Mr. Slow, what's your opinion of this? The DPP allegedly instructed the police to file criminal charges against Dion Bascom. Obviously, it's based on this. They're showing their hand in this report. But when this same DPP went before the Caribbean Court of Justice recently, in the case of this little girl, the Chief Justice admonished her, actually told her she's misleading the court, and that as a Minister of Justice, she was not fairly dispensing justice in Guyana. Is this case here proving what Justice Saunders said?
Well, no charge has been filed as yet, so I don't know what.
But she recommended charges. She is the Minister of Justice. She should know to recommend these charges would be a contradiction to the Public Disclosures Act or a violation of the Act.
I have heard the speculation. I've heard people saying that charges were 7 charges, but I have not seen.
The police issued a statement saying, not naming the charges, but the police issued a statement saying the DPP has recommended charges, but they never charged him.
How things are going at this stage, I don't want to believe anything that these people are saying unless I see evidence. So if the police issue such a statement, I am not going to believe it until I see it in black and
Well, the
white.
DPP did not dispute it.
But let me say this further. Let me say this further. From the inception, I've been saying that the RSS, the Regional Security System, has no competence, has no capacity to deal with criminal investigation, none whatsoever. Check their website. The RSS is set up, and the whole history of the RSS is there to deal with emergency responses. So things like hurricane, things like natural disasters, that is what they do. And if you read into this, I think they're implying that having been approached, they then got somebody from someplace. So they in themselves do not have the capacity to deal with matters like this. They don't. So I am not surprised. Really, I'm not surprised by these findings as revealed by the Ministry of Home Affairs. I will pay anything now to see the entire report, to see how they came, the rationale, how they came to these key findings that they are talking about, having not interviewed the complainant, the man who made the whistleblower, and having not done any extensive investigation. How did they arrive? I have noted too that all the key findings as revealed by the Ministry of Affairs is focused on Bascom.
Right.
Nothing really about the investigation, what took place immediately following this murder, just outside the residence, close to the residence. They haven't dealt with that. They haven't dealt with that. So they came to debunk, to use the word of the crime chief.
So the entire this is not an investigation.
Bascom's allegation.
This is not an investigation. Obviously, it is an attempt to validate the police narrative about Bascom and to undermine his credibility. I mean, listen to the word of the report. The statement that allegedly from the report, or allegedly based on the report. The veracity of the allegations was further undermined by the fact that Sergeant Bascom was found. We don't know by whom. The RSS never interviewed Sergeant Bascom. Was found to be living rent-free in a furnished property in the area of Esquibel, belonging to an Esquibel businessman. This is the same narrative being pushed by Blanham, being pushed by the CID, and being pushed by Mohammeds. So here you see the government of Guyana, of whom the president is a friend of Azuddin Mohammed, supporting the narrative of the Mohammeds, supporting the narrative of CID, supporting the narrative of the RSS rather, is supporting the narrative of the government, of Mohammeds, of the police. We don't know what's the difference here. How can an RSS, Council, do you know if the RSS interviewed or obtained any independent information about the living conditions or where Sergeant Bascom lived in Esquibel from the time he was transferred there to now?
Like I said before, Rickford, Mr. Bascom has indicated they have never interviewed him. But there's another point that is very disturbing. That perhaps we should consider. You remember when this incident took place and Mr. Fagundes was shot? We were told that there was no CCTV footage available because for some curious reason.
Go ahead.
No, it wasn't working. No CCTV footage, and therefore they couldn't enhance images because there were none. Now we are being told through the Ministry of Home Affairs, and I have to emphasize that this is what the Ministry of Home Affairs
that they have the footage.
That they have footage which purports to contradict a statement by somebody who arrived in a motor vehicle. Now that has got to be amazing, because if they publicly said around the time of the incident that there was no footage, and they now say that they have footage, then it obviously means that some attempt was being made to cover up evidence to protect somebody. Because why else would the Guyana Police Force say at the time of the murder that there is no footage available, and now where they have been placed in a position of compromise and their credibility is at an all-time low, they suddenly say, we have footage. Apart from what the footage may have, it obviously indicates that why would you duck footage, say you don't have it, unless you had some motive for doing so? And this further impairs the confidence citizenry the citizenry will have in the Guyana Police Force. Because how are you now saying, look, we have footage that shows that there was a third person in the car that contradicts some critical witness, when you have publicly said none of the cameras was working, there was nothing available? That is a scary place to be. Because if the law enforcement agency, which is entrusted with the constitutional authority to investigate crimes, can say it doesn't have evidence, and then afterwards, when its credibility is completely shattered, it says we do have this evidence and we've always had the evidence, and you only bring it out for the purpose of contradicting some statement somebody made. That is a scary process. And if they have the footage, they ought now to publicly release it so that they can get assistance from the members of the public who might be able to identify information on the video footage, which may help solve the crime. So now that they've admitted that they have the footage, we're happy about it because this is additional evidence. And we hope that this takes their capacity to solve the crime, which we don't think they have the capacity to do, further.
Or they don't want to. But I want to read that part of the report that you're talking about.
Think about this. Think about this, Rickford.
Mhm.
Imagine somebody saying, look, a young lady was sexually assaulted outside of some building with a lot of bright lights, and there are cameras there. And they say, look, we went and we checked the government footage and there was none. And the lady's saying, look, Mr. X raped me. Nothing heard. Months afterwards, somebody comes forward and says, I was there. And the police know I was there. And the police says, you're lying. Here is the footage of the rape. Seriously? Is this really what they're asking us to believe? This is frightening. This is a law enforcement agency ducking evidence by its own admission. This is not by
Yes.
influence. By its own admission, it's saying we had this evidence, but we were not going to use it, and we will tell you we don't have it. And this is not national security.
Nigel, by the time this program is finished, the police force will issue a statement saying they were talking about a specific camera, not the one you're talking about. Trust me. These guys are so
But
stupid.
even if there was a specific camera, they said no footage was
Footage.
available. This footage just turned up.
Let me read the part of the statement that you're talking about. A close associate of Ricardo Fagundes was in his company just prior to his death. Who was in his company just prior to his death? Gave investigative officers inaccurate statements relating to the events on the night of the incident. The evidence obtained by the investigators revealed these inaccuracies. An example is the fact that the close associate said that Fagundes was driving the vehicle on the arrival of the location of the incident. However, CCTV records show that the said associate was the one driving. CCTV also show that the description of the movement of the vehicle whilst in the area was also inaccurate, and he neglected to tell officers about the third person who arrived at the club with them in the vehicle. Nothing. First of all, you said it. I was going to raise this point. They suddenly find CCTV footage, but nothing here is in relation to Dion Bascom's allegation about corruption. Nothing here is material or germane to the murder. Are they saying that the third man is the man who shoot the people? Or are they saying it's the driver that shoot for nothing here? This point that they're making has absolutely nothing to do with Boscom's allegation about who take bribe or who shot the man. So I don't
But
understand why this is in this
Rickford,
report.
Rickford, I agree strongly with what you're saying, but I want you to just think about this. The Guyana Police Force says there was no footage at all,
No footage, right?
publicly, and in a crime that was as sensational as this. And the only time we hear about this is when they are backed into a corner and they say that we have footage. That is evident. That is ducking evidence. That is what scares me about this. We can come to Bascom and the allegation, but how could the Guyana Police Force, that are responsible for protecting the citizenry, say that we had this footage when it said it never had it before? And the question must be, why would they admit at this point that they have the evidence, which they always had, and not use it. That to me is unbelievable. It
But listen to
really.
this. This is another aspect of the case, of the report, at least the statement on the report. Sergeant Bascom has alleged that the Ghana Police Force is trying to cover up the unlawful killing, homicide of Ugandas. However, there is evidence that the GPS has diligently sought regional and international assistance in involved in this case. That does not disprove that they try to cover up the case, as their own statement is saying. They ducked the CCTV footage. Now they're saying it's there. So that the statement in itself, this statement issued by the Ministry of Home Affairs, verifies that the police force did try to cover up evidence in the case. Paulslow?
Exactly, the exact point, because they said publicly, in and around the time of the murder, that there wasn't any CCTV footage of the incident. Apart from what was circulated, there was a video circulating on social media, and they said they had nothing else. And there was an outcry because people said, "But how is it so close to the State House, you don't have any footage?" People ask the question to what happened to all the cameras on the way to this place where the car was eventually found. And they were silent in respect to that, but they said publicly that there was no CCTV footage. Now, in an attempt, and I'm going to use the word again, to debunk, because that is the word the crime chief used, in an attempt to debunk Bascom's claim about cover up and corruption. They're suddenly saying that there's this footage which show that some witness in the matter, which contradicts some statement made from a witness in this matter. This thing is old. This thing is really remarkable. But you know, they say when you tell lies, if you tell the truth, you don't have to remember it. But when you start to fabricate things, that is really going to run into trouble. And this is clear evidence of this fabrication. And you're trying to cover up, or you're trying to cover up the cover up, and things are going to be revealed.
Do you actually think the RSS wrote the report? If this statement derives from this purported report, do you think the RSS or this superintendent, or sorry, this chief inspector actually wrote this thing?
But could I just urge you? You see,
Yes.
we're going into speculation here. The solution to that is produce the report. You know, we are attempting to give credibility to the Ministry of Home Affairs report on the report, and the simple thing is produce the report. Otherwise, you know, and when we see the report, we can deal with it, because this clearly is an incredible set of references being made by the Ministry of Home Affairs.
Okay, let me continue, because I want to go through every aspect of every conclusion of this report. Further, report without even.
You see,
go ahead.
It's every conclusion
that
the ministry
in the
said
statement,
in
exactly.
the report
The statement alleges was in the report. The statement says that the report claims that Bascom was an employee of this Escribo businessman. The exact same thing Mohammed said. The exact same thing the police said at the press conference. But there's a difference here. It says that he was employed by this businessman as a security officer in direct contravention of Section 32 of the Police Act, when the police commissioner said at the press conference that if Bascom was employed by this man, it was perfectly legal. The vice president said it was perfectly legal, but it should be stopped. In addition to that, Bascom has said that's not true. He was never an employee of this businessman.
But Richard, sorry, again, you see, you have to take these things at the face value. If he was employed, let's assume, let's give them the full credibility. He was employed. How does that relate to the issues that he made?
Exactly.
This is unbelievable. I mean, assuming he was all those things, how does that relate in any way to the accuracy of what he said? Because in other words, here's what they're saying. Look, an old thief see a man rape a woman, and because he's an old thief, the rape didn't take place.
Right.
Crazy.
You
know, I don't even want to get into whether he was a tenant, he is not a tenant. What's the relationship?
No, but the most important thing here is the lack of credibility of this conclusion. They have no verification. They did not talk to the businessman. who has confirmed that. I confirmed today, they did not speak to the businessman. They did not, you're confirming that they did not speak to Bascom. They're just rehashing what Adam told them or the people at CID told them. And they're putting it in, well, the Ministry of Home Affairs is saying in this statement that they put that in the report also.
Yes, well, let me say this. I'm familiar with the section that the of the Police Act, Chapter 1601, that they're saying about no employment and that. But let me say, if this section is to be applied, this is one of these archaic regulations back in the colonial times. If you are to apply that section 31 in the police force, you ain't no police. Let me tell you what the section says. It says a member of the force may be discharged at any time if, without the consent of the commissioner, A, he carries out any business or trade or holds any other office of employment for hire or gain. B, he resides at any premises where any member of his family keeps a shop or carries on any like business. C, he owns or any member of his family living with him holds any license granted in pursuance of the liquor license law or the law regulating place of public entertainment, or he has pecuniary interest in any shop or business carried out by virtue of such a license. And D, his wife, not being separated or divorced from him, keeps a shop or carries on any like business in Guyana. I mean, this is remarkable. If you were to apply Section 31 in 2022, it means you don't have, because almost every single policeman either don't have a minibus, either don't have some side hustle, and this basically say that that is illegal. So this is rubbish that they're talking about there.
But in addition to that, Mr. Slow, yes, we acknowledge all of that, that the law says that. What is most frightening to me is that the Ministry of Home Affairs can put this in the statement as a conclusion of the report, when in fact it has no basis.
That's
It's
no bearing.
absolute nonsense. It's not true.
It has no
And,
bearing
and
on
they
the
made
matter.
the investigators made absolutely no no effort to independently verify this information that the police give to them.
I am not even sure at this stage that there was any investigator. Trust me. I am not sure because, as I've said before, a matter like this, and that's just reflect on other jurisdictions and so on. A matter like this, the man would have at least some stage, he would have presented himself to the media. This is Chief Inspector So from So. He would have given his background, his resume, to let us understand that he's competent in what he was about to do. At the end, even though he might not have revealed all the details, I have concluded his report, and these are the something, but this part was never presented. This reminds me of the former Attorney General of the United States, William Barr, with the Mueller report. This is exactly what happened. Robert Mueller, the special investigator of whoever he was referred to, did the investigation. And at the end, special counsel submitted it to the DOJ. And Mr. Barr, who was the DOJ, came out to the public and he said, this is what the report
said, right.
Trump. And we have now seen
the report said something completely different, right?
Fabrication. So I suspect, well, it might very well be if a report was in fact submitted, when the report or if the report is made available, we might then see that this thing that was released by the Ministry of Affairs
contradicts the report.
Contradiction, total fabrication.
But Nigel, I want to follow up again, because this statement, which they claim is based on the conclusions of the report, makes a categorical conclusion here. Further, Section 31, 1. Further, Section 31, 1, the consent of the police commissioner. Further, Section 31 prohibits the rank from holding any other office of employment for hire or gain. As his counsel, is Mr. Bascom employed by any person anywhere in Guyana other than the Guyana Police Force?
Not that I'm aware of.
So what is the basis for that?
You see, you're giving credibility to what is really a sad piece of. It reflects poorly in our history. This is almost like the Pink Panther. We could only assume we're dealing with the Pink Panther here. This couldn't be a serious police force, and it really, I mean, I say this, but it is extremely worrying that is the state of our Guyana police force.
Not part of the report. Sergeant Bascom has denied leaking information to the media as it relates to the ongoing investigation. However, there's evidence that he did contact the press, and this was confirmed by the police.
Yeah. So what?
So exactly, what does this
So
have to do
what?
with
So what?
the allegation?
But does that affect the price of cheese? So what?
So, based on this, it is categorically stated here that this confirms that Mr. Caesar did not receive a $30 million bribe. Is that what this report is saying?
Well,
Is that the conclusion the guys can draw here?
I leave this to Mr. Stowe. This is the more we even spend time in what clearly is a very poor and sad attempt to bury a serving member of the Ghana Police Force is sad.
Right. And
well,
they're using. Go ahead, sorry. Go ahead, Mr.
it's very
Stowe.
sad indeed, because I've had people from around the Caribbean, former law enforcement officers with whom I work, and from even wider field, have been reaching out to me. I said, what nonsense is this? The same thing that we were saying over the weekend, even before then, when they heard about RSS, people who are in the region and who are familiar with the functions of RSS have been asking me questions that I can't answer. I tell them plain, I don't understand, just like you. I'm in the dark. I don't know that RSS has such a capability. And since this release was made on Friday, I've had the same questions. What is it? What nonsense? And some of them have been even more colorful in the description, And the thing is amazing. And you don't have to be any investigative or security expert. Any ordinary person with little basic common sense reads through this will see all the glaring discrepancies and how nonsensical this whole thing is.
Another aspect of the report that is
someone would say this is sheer jackassery. That is what it
go ahead.
Rickford,
Maybe we should name the CID that Jacassery, the Department of Jacassery. Go ahead, Nigel.
What this does show, I think, even in its perversity, is that they clearly, if what the ministry says is correct, they obviously only spoke to the same officers who were the people identified as being involved in unorthodox behavior. Because
corruption. You say
this report could only have come from them. So you come in and you clearly are guided by the people who clearly have been identified by Mr. Bascom in his statements as having participated in conduct that was less than becoming of the Ghana Police Force. And so that in and of itself is disturbing. It really is
another recitation of the police story, the police narrative. Sergeant Bascom alleged that there was a device in the possession of the Ghana Police Force which identified Mark Phone's cell phone as being on the scene of the unlawful killing homicide of Ugandas. When it happened, however, the Ghana Police Force technical officer, SP Rodwell Sarabo, has confirmed that the Ghana Police Force does not have any such technology. That's a lie. A police officer.
Well, first of all, is Mr. Sarabo the technical officer? I don't
exactly.
believe so.
That's why the question.
That's the first question.
That's
what I said. I do not believe Mr. Sarabo is the technical officer of the Ghana Police Force, unless he's been assigned to that department.
I don't know. So the Ministry of Home Affairs statement is claiming that the investigation found that the Ghana Police Force has no such equipment. So this man, this retired chief inspector from the Metropolitan Department in London, went to every police station, in every room, in every part of the country, and checked for this equipment, and he did not find it. So he concluded. But I was told today by a police source that the police force used this same equipment to track the alleged killers of Dr. Roach. And that's how they found out that the phone was traveling going towards Berbice. And they tracked him all the way to Springlands and arrested him when he was about to cross Springland to go to Suriname. And several other police officers have indicated that this is not true. In addition to that, we know that a former government official confirmed that this equipment was handed over to the Ghana Police Force. So this is another factual lie in the statement allegedly based on the RSS report.
You're getting like the report. Explain to me what a factual lie is.
No,
I,
this is a
I hear
lie.
this.
Sorry, if I said that, sorry. This is a lie. This is a
Okay.
lie because factually, this is inaccurate. That's what I meant to say. Sorry. I didn't mean to sound
No,
unorthodox
I
in the
just thought
police
it was a
force.
lovely
It's all
term. I
right.
mean, I
But
think it's a lovely
I
term. You
meant
can adopt it.
material lie though.
Factual
This is
lie.
a material lie. This is a lie. This is the RSS lying again for the police force.
But
Well, we don't know. We don't know. We
again,
don't know.
this is what the ministry is saying
This is
because
what the ministry is saying.
yeah,
Like,
that's this is what the ministry is saying. For all you know, the RSS. If again, I must say, if indeed someone came from the RSS to conduct this review or this investigation, let's see the report. Let's hear what he says. How he arrived at this conclusion. You speculated, or you said a while ago that maybe he's suggesting that he would have gone to every police station and to check the equipment. But let us see the report. Let us see the report. How the gentleman, this phantom person at this stage, arrived at these conclusions, these 7 main or these 8 main points that are pointed out by the ministry. How they said that these are the key findings, 8 key findings. How did they arrive? How did this person who did this investigation, if in fact an investigation was done, how did he arrive at these key findings? That is what we have to see the report in order to do, because he's not going to be presented in front of the media and for us to question him or people to question him. Perhaps they give the impression that the investigation has been completed and the man gone his way. So that is what it is. We don't even know, as I've said before, who he is, so we can check the background to find out how credible this person might be.
Somebody
the
from
other
the
thing,
police force just texted me saying that the investigator never even interviewed the officers involved in the investigation.
Well, I think that's clear by now.
So the statement issued by the Home Affairs Ministry concluded this: it is the opinion of the reviewing officer that the Guyana Police Force has done extensive work into the unlawful killing or homicide investigation of Fagundes. There is no evidence to suggest that there was any attempt to cover up, and there is also no evidence of corrupt practices as alleged by Mr. Bascom.
But let me interject here and give them one piece of evidence of an attempt to cover up. The crime chief at that so-called press conference said publicly, it's on record, that they were told by Roger Khan that this boy Bacchus, Rondell Bacchus, was the suspect gunman, and that Mark Richmond was the driver of the getaway car. They issued a wanted bulletin for Bacchus. They never did likewise for Richmond. That is evidence, in my mind, of an attempt to cover up.
But not only that, they never even interviewed Richmond. They had a lengthy interview interrogation of Bacchus with his attorney, meeting him there. And in addition to that, the police force lied. The police force lied when they said that Bascom never took in Bacchus. That's a cover-up. They're lying.
Well,
They're trying to cover up the fact that Bascom has credibility and has provided accurate information.
The crime chief produced a clipping from the Kaicho News.
Based on a statement they put out.
They produced a clipping from the Kaicho News and a photograph showing Bacchus with his lawyer and 2 plainclothes Rango Yasumer policemen. And according to the crime chief, that showed that Bascom was lying when he said this thing. This is remarkable. And as I've said before, people have been calling me, people who I know, people, former members of forces in the Caribbean and even serving members, have become, Paul, what is going on with the Guyana Police Force? People have been asking, when they read these things, in the age now of social media, these things go all over the world and people see, and we are the laughing stock. People are laughing at us when you see all of this foolishness that is being published.
Maybe Rickford, when you start your program discussing this, you should use the theme song from the Flintstones.
Yes.
Meet the Flintstones.
And I would also try to get Barney Rubble to investigate this murder.
Absolutely.
But I want to come back to they're attacking Bascom's credibility. The entire objective of this exercise, there's no question about it, it's so obvious, was to bring in the RSS to give validation to the police attack of Bascom's credibility. So, like we discussed earlier, they said that Bascom was angry because he was arrested in this sting operation. But in fact, counsel, Bascom was never processed or prosecuted, was he?
No, no, no. They realized that he had nothing to do with that incident. But again, all that goes. I mean, and sorry, that only goes to motive. It doesn't go to accuracy. Everything the police, you see, Mr. Slow will probably confirm that when you're investigating, you have a whole set of information that you have to process. Some people may give you information that is motivated by malice. Some people may have credibility issues but give you valid information. And what you have to do is to sift through that, look for independent corroboration of bits and pieces of evidence to see whether or not aspects of what is said or being said is accurate. This sort of social media investigation and you can't believe him because X, Y, and Z coming from the highest rank of criminal investigation in the Guyana Police Force is most disturbing. Absolutely most disturbing.
And I want to confirm again that in February, Bascom did an interview with a journalist. That interview was never aired. On May 18th, he said while he went to court at Leonora, he spoke with Mr. Watts and told him that he was basically obstructed from arresting Mark Richmond. On March 3rd, he said he communicated this same information to then acting police commissioner Nigel Happy. Then he said on April 14th, he sent this information to the president and the Minister of Home Affairs. On the 16th of June, he had a meeting with the Minister of Home Affairs, who asked him for more information, and he provided it. Now, when this matter came out publicly after Mr. Bascom did his social media video, the Home Affairs Minister came out and said what the police said and attacked Bascom, saying that he only made this allegation because he was arrested. Mr. Slow, wasn't the Minister of Home Affairs being dishonest? That in fact, months before, he was provided with this information.
Well, if it is that I have no reason to doubt Bascom, because more you look into this thing, Bascom's story seems more credible, and what the minister is saying, what the commissioner, what the crime chief, and what this RSS report says. So one, I tend to believe him, but that is perhaps even more than dishonest if it is that Bascom in fact went to the minister and told him this. And the next question, the other question that we have, if you're going to do a proper investigation, Mr. Hughes indicated a while ago, you get all of these bits of information. If you want to attack Bascom's credibility, have regards to the fact that he said he went to all of these people, the acting commissioner Nigel Happy, the Home Affairs Minister, the president, did they question those persons to find out if what he's saying is true? That is the way investigations are done. Because if you want to dispute what he is saying, then you have to question all of those persons. He said in one of the things, that when he got the call from Rondell Bacchus, he was with Sarabo. And he told Sarabo that, look, this man called me to take him in. Did they ask Sarabo anything about that? And I say again, I mean, they claim that Sarabo, being the technical man, claims that they don't have any such equipment. I have been saying, and I continue to maintain, the only way you can get after, perhaps somewhere to the truth, not by getting ordinary statements from these players. You have to have a proper inquiry and let them go and make the statement on the oath.
On the oath, yes.
Let them go to an inquiry, make these statements on the oath. It's going to be a different story. As a former officer would say, it's going to be an horse of a different color. Once they hold the Bible, the Gita, the Quran, and swear, because then you're going to be able to parade them before the court for forgery. So
let's go to counsel. Counsel, wouldn't you find much delight in deposing these gentlemen in a court of law? or cross-examining them in a court of law?
Rickford, we trying to make light of what's a really scary situation, you
Exactly.
know. This guy's life is in danger. There's even more reason now to get rid of him because more people are at stake here, more people's credibility, people in office, like Mr. Slow just said, the Minister of Home Affairs. If he was told about this before by Bascom, the obvious question is, what did you do with this information?
Exactly.
So don't even come to whether you want to contradict Bascom. If an officer comes to you and says, look, there has been unorthodox conduct in the investigation into Mr. Fagundes outside of Palm Court, what did you do with the information? Did you dismiss it? Did you think it wasn't credible? And if you thought it wasn't credible, why did you think it wasn't credible? So there are a lot of people, if we were a normal society, that would be caught up in this because if we were in a normal society and it comes out that the Minister of Home Affairs received this complaint and Mr. Bascom produces his cell phone that he sent the message to the minister, there would be calls for the minister's resignation. If he went to the commissioner of police and gave him this information about the conduct of the investigation, there would be calls for, well, he's no longer there, but there certainly would be calls for sanctions. And so we are making light of what I think is a particularly frightening situation. Because if this...
I'm not making light of it at all.
No,
Go
no,
ahead.
I'm not accusing you of making light. What I'm saying is that it is because it is so absurd and sublime and ridiculous. We really are at the stage where we can't do anything else but laugh because it's like a kid trying to sell you, rocket equipment. This is unbelievable. We are supposed to be a modern society with a lot of oil wealth, and this is the level of investigation. This is what is going on, and and we really are really and truly playing with the life. We're not playing with the life. The consequence of this is the life of Mr. Bascom. And it is now clear that he needs protection. I think he needs political asylum, quite frankly,
Right.
because at this point, it is evident that nothing is going to happen here, despite what is clear, strong information that challenges what happened in this investigation and the people who would be impacted if
And
uh,
there's a concerted effort to cover up the cover up the cover up. Even Stanford News says that. Stanford News did an editorial, said the cover up of the cover up. I mean, it is amazing. And but I want to get to two more points before we close off. Mr. Bascom has said that one of the businessmen involved in this case allegedly, well, somebody allegedly contacted him on behalf of this businessman asking for a meeting. And the person said that his life would be good after that. Are you aware of that, Mr.
I,
Counsel?
again, I don't want to impugn anybody's character. I don't want to, all I would say is if Mr. Bascom were to even remotely consider a meeting in those circumstances, he should contact Mr. Sandy, Mr. Merriman, and the rest of the people, make the appropriate arrangements, say goodbye to his wife, and he could proceed to the meeting. That's my only comment on that.
And who's Mr. Sandy again? An Undertaker?
Yeah,
Yes, yeah.
yeah.
Okay, well, that's the answer from the council. The other thing I want to, Mr. Bascom, and I've read in a section of the press that he expressed concern that his lawyer wrote the president twice and asking for him to be placed in witness protection. The president has ignored this. He hasn't responded to you. Well, not ignore, but to me, that's an ignore, but he has not responded. Um, the president is the friend, Mr. Slow, I'm going to direct this question to you. The president is the friend of one of the business people involved in this allegation. Can this be construed that the president is acting in the interest of his friend? And second, they have taken away the weapon of Sergeant Bascom. Do you think the Ghana police force is trying to, when you look at them coordinating, they're coordinating with lawyers, they're coordinating their narrative with the Mohammeds, they're coordinating with the RSS, they're coordinating with government. Don't you think all of this is pointing to the fact that the Ghana police force is deliberately facilitating the vulnerability, should I say, of Mr. Bascom, exposing him to the elements that can harm him by taking away his weapon?
Let me say this. I don't know of the relationship between the president and the businessman. But clearly, based on all the statements that have been made by the police and now this statement that is made by the Ministry of Home Affairs, they're clearly designed to put Bascom's life in danger, whether intentionally or not. Because when you're attacking his credibility, they did that the first day they had the press conference. That is what it was all about. The attack on Mr. Mr. Bascom's credibility. Now you have the RSS actually supporting that. And if it is that the firearm that was issued to him for his protection and duty is taken away from him, then one can only see this pattern to have him exposed to danger. There can be no question about that. Which is even more sad. Which even goes to show it is more evidence. It is more evidence that all they are trying to do is to get rid of the whistleblower. All they're trying to do, either by bringing
in wide view of the public, they're trying to get him killed.
Bringing law. Well, Mr. Bascom said that, and that is what they are not emphasizing, because he made these allegations long before the issue with Kanu on the arrest. He made these allegations about the cover-up and the corruption long before. He went public after this incident with Kanu, and he said in the thing that the reason why he went public is because he was told. Remember, this is a man who
I was coming to that. Yes,
he was told that this arrest and his picture being put there
was supposed to be a setup for him to be killed. You're right.
Was a setup. That is what he said, and that is what. So if after all of that you have these statements that you're making, and you're taking away the firearm that was issued to him, you're trying to make him more vulnerable, either for him to then decide mea culpa and come and beg, or to be gotten rid of altogether, which is as Nigel has been saying, which is very frightening. This is a serving sergeant of the Guyana Police Force, and this is the way that he's been treated. Mr. Conway, my colleague, refers to the Serpico matter. This is even worse. This is even worse than that. This is even worse than that, because here it is. In Serpico's case, it was his fellow policeman. But in this case now, it seems as though the Minister of National Security is involved. The man who was the Commissioner of Police was given the information. And he's saying that even the President was provided the information. So it is even worse than that.
Counsel?
Oh, Serpico is one. We don't know how Mr. Fraser died either. Leon Fraser.
Oh,
you got a lot. You got a lot of stories. I mean,
yeah.
You can go through the history of the Guyana Police Force, and there are several incidents where
as his counsel, what is your view on them taking away his firearm? And then, do you think that's a setup for him to be caught with an unlawful firearm? Because they also denied him a firearm license.
Well, the fact that they took it away doesn't entitle him to go pick up an unlawful firearm, and I understand why people may want to do that, but what it is clear, it is that they intend to leave him naked and exposed, so that you create the circumstances for people who may have other intentions in relation to his health and safety, to make the job a little easier for them. That's essentially what they do, and that is very frightening. If we want to pretend to live in a society in which the rule of law operates, then if you feel somewhere about Mr. Bascom, you treat him according to the law, and everybody gets the protection according to the law. You don't end up in a situation like this where the police force has repeatedly embarrassed itself. You have touched on several incidents. Bascom didn't take him in, and then the chap comes and says Bascom took him in. You just go through them. Remember, we're not dealing with some station sergeant here. We are dealing with the crime chief and the head of major crimes, who have been embarrassed by their own statements. How is the average man in the street going to have any confidence in the Guyana Police Force after having observed not only their actions, their statements, the contradictions. This, I think, has brought us to the stage where we need to restructure the Guyana police force, particularly its capacity to investigate, so that we get a modern police force that is more in tune and has the capacity to solve the issues that we have here. One fact that we cannot uh, doubt at the moment, and that is after a year and a half, they have not solved the murder of Mr. Fagundes, which took place near to the president's official residence. And this is where they say they have video footage. There's so many acts and omissions that raise the question of the capacity of the Guyana police force to solve a crime where they have as much evidence as they have. And if they can't do this for somebody who gets shot near the president, what happens to the average man in the
So
street?
average man, yep. Um, so I have a message here. I have two messages. I want to read this one message, and then I want to read a comment I just saw here that is so important. So this is a comment from a state assemblyman here in New York, who's saying to ask you if you have written to the United States government on this matter, and if you intend to approach international organizations like Amnesty International, etc., for justice for and the protection of Mr. Bascom. That's one.
Uh, yeah, sorry, should I answer that or wait for the second
Yes,
question?
go ahead. Go ahead. I'll
Okay.
come to the audience.
From the time Mr. Bascom came to me, the question of approaching a foreign government loomed large because we had this situation before with Mr. Bacchus. Way back, you will remember Mr. Bacchus, who subsequently was killed. And I did go to the US Embassy and Mr. Bacchus was interviewed. So when this started, that was a very and remains a very valid and active consideration. However, we took the decision, or I should say my firm took the decision, to afford Mr. Bascom and the law enforcement agencies and His Excellency, the President of Guyana, the opportunity under the law to be able to protect this man who is a whistleblower. That's why we wrote to the President under the Public Disclosures Act and said his life is in danger, and this is the situation. It is evident from the lack of response from the President that this is not a matter of priority to him. He's aware of it, and he has no interest in providing any protection to Mr. Bascom. Two, it is evident that the Guyana Police Force have decided to target Mr. Bascom, and by doing that, they intend to punish him for having exposed their corruption. So the next step is, of course, the only available option to Mr. Bascom now is political asylum in a foreign country. Because if the president has not even acknowledged his plea for witness protection after having provided all this evidence, if the Ministry of Home Affairs has sought to repeat what the crime chief has said and what the commissioner of police has said in a press conference which is directly attacking Mr. Bascom, it means that in his own country, he is not likely to get any protection under the law, or the rule of law clearly does not apply to him. So they have shut by their own actions all the available options. So of course we are in the process of engaging foreign governments with a view to seeking what is perhaps the only uh, remaining option to Mr. Bascom, which is political asylum, because it is clear from all the activity that we've seen, from the president's inaction all the way across, that Mr. Bascom now has no recourse available to him that will protect his life. So that is my response to the person who asked that question.
Second to last question. This is Mr. Hughes? Question from the audience: does Mr. Bascom intend to take any legal action against the Guyana Police Force?
Um, those are options that we are exploring, but at the present moment, we're trying to keep Mr. Bascom alive and get him to a place of safety. Those will come in time. He's got 3 years under the statute of limitation to do whatever he wants in that regard. If it was libel, 1 year, but at the present moment, what I have is a client who's trying to stay alive.
Great. Mr. Slow, this question must be for you. It's from Carl Miller. Um, and it's posted in the comment. I think it's a very important question. Why would any decent and educated citizen want to join the Ghana police force when it's demonstrated that they're corrupt to the core?
Well, it's a very good question because given all that is being said, not only in this instance, but every time you pick up the media, something negative about the police, somebody involved in corruption, something negative being said. And therefore, one would ask the question, if someone really wants a rewarding career, why would they join at this stage? But I can tell you, it had not always been so. And one will hope, we spoke about, somebody alluded to reform, one will hope that if steps are taken to have the force reform, that is going to get to the stage where people can have a rewarding career. I had a rewarding career in the police force. But however, in regards to all that is being revealed, one would ask the question whether the appetite is there for any serious reform of the police force. Because if you have the Ministry of Home Affairs that is responsible for the police force coming out with this statement or these points claimed to be made in this report, one has to question the seriousness about getting to the bottom of corruption and reforming the police force. So to the caller, I say at this time it might be very difficult for one to be motivated, one with good reasons, with good motives to be motivated, but perhaps things will change. I am not going to hold my breath, but perhaps things will change at some time in the near future.
Finally, I'm going to ask this to both of you. Have you ever seen a situation anywhere where there is this apparent coordination between a murder suspect or murder suspects, the police, and then now an external agency that was procured to give validation to the police position on these matters? Have you ever seen that? Where you have,
Rickford,
yeah,
there's a leading question. What we have is the Ministry of Home Affairs saying what the foreign agency has said. Until we see what the RSS report says, I don't think it would be prudent to operate on the basis that that is what the RSS said.
but you have written to I read in the press that you have written to the government, the police commissioner, asking for a copy of that report. Have you got a response? And do you
No,
anticipate? Okay,
No, I was going to say that request went out today, this morning, by email to the Commissioner of Police. But, given the culture of the Commissioner, he never responds. We have never received a response from the Commissioner of Police. Not unlike the President, where we haven't received a response. So I think the general culture in Ghana is that people don't respond. So the fact that he doesn't respond, I would say, is probably consistent with previous conduct. And I don't anticipate that we will get a response. It's sad, but that's where we are.
final statements, Mr. Slow.
Well, I am saying, as I've said repeatedly on interviews and on the program that I host, that this requires two investigations. Right? It requires investigation from a competent source to investigate the murder of Ricardo Fagundes. Where we're talking about from the time it occurred, all the action that was taken. So you need an investigation for that. In relation to the allegations made by Detective Sergeant Bascom, I continue to say that you need a commission of inquiry. I have advanced that the reason why you need a commission of inquiry so that people can go and give evidence. People can be summoned, not only members of the police force and those who are involved, but other people might have pertinent information about this matter. They can be summoned, made to give evidence on oath. The commission of inquiry will have the capacity to subpoena records and that. So unless you get to that stage, you're going to get to people giving statements which are untrue. And it is going to be difficult for you to prove how untrue it is. But let them go before a commission of inquiry so that if they are found to be lying, they can be sanctioned criminally for the lie. So unless and until that, and I'm saying this too to the persons who are involved, especially the businessman who's involved. I said it before, that if you're really interested in clearing your name, if you are really interested in proving your innocence, because you're innocent until proven guilty, then you should be supporting a credible investigation. You should be advocating for a credible investigation, not this thing that we hear RSS come and then for some reason they write RSS and they left out an important vowel. That's not going to save it. Bringing a private lawsuit is not going to clear your name. And if you really want your name cleared, you should be advocating for a proper, credible commission of inquiry and an investigation.
Indeed. Counsel?
My closing remarks would be if what the Ministry of Home Affairs has said about the RSS report is accurate, it is clear that within the Caribbean we do not possess the ability or the capacity to conduct the sort of investigation that is necessary. And therefore, we need to move to those forces that are perhaps outside of the Caribbean, whether in the United States or the United Kingdom or in Canada or wherever else they may be located, to come and really conduct a full-scale investigation, as Mr. Slow says, both into the murder of Mr. Fagundes and also into the allegations that have been made by Mr. Bascom. So we have, by our own actions, as we often do in the Caribbean, eliminated ourselves as either capable or willing. So we have to go to the next step, which is to ask international investigative agencies, whether FBI or otherwise, that have the capacity and will conduct what is called a most credible investigation, including the interview of the person that triggered all of this. That, to me, is the most obvious next step.
Thank you, gentlemen. And also, before we conclude, I just wanted to say that I find it amazing that since March and April and June, this allegation has been brought to the attention of the police commissioner, the Minister of Home Affairs, and the President, and no action was taken until Mr. Bascom went public with this information. I think the onus is now on the President, the former police commissioner, and the Minister of Home Affairs to say to the people of Guyana exactly what they did with this information when they received it. It is amazing that we have a government that sees allegations of corruption to cover up a murder as something to just play a political football with, and attacking the accuser, the whistleblower, and exposing his life to danger when they know that he's been threatened. They know his life has been threatened. Taking away his firearm, refusing to give him a firearm license. As far as I'm concerned, the government of Guyana is acting in a dangerous way to ensure that Sergeant Bascom is killed. That's my conclusion. Thank you very much for listening. I want to thank my panelists, former Assistant Police Commissioner Paul Slow, and attorney for Mr. Dion Bascom, Mr. Nigel Hughes, for joining the program. Thank you all for listening. Good night, and I see you on Tuesday night for another edition of Conversation with Rickford Burke. Have a good night, everybody.